The old mill pond was supposed to be a quiet place, not famous, not dramatic, not the sort of water that ends up in a viral clip with sirens and yellow tape. It sat behind the town like a forgotten sentence at the end of a long paragraph, an oval of dark water ringed by reeds, half-shadowed by cottonwoods, fed by a lazy creek that wandered in and out as if it had better things to do. People used it the way people use familiar scenery. They jogged past it in the early mornings, earbuds in, eyes forward. Teenagers cut through the path on bikes. Couples stopped at the little overlook bench when the light was good. In summer, you could hear the thin slap of a fishing line and the occasional shout when someone thought they'd hooked something legendary. And then there was the mill. The mill wasn't running anymore, hadn't for decades. What remained was a long brick building with boarded windows and a sagging wooden loading platform, half swallowed by ivy. The town had promised more than once to restore it, to turn it into a museum or a cafe or an arts space, which is what towns say when they don't know what else to do with their own history. Mostly, it just sat there. That pond, though, still worked. It still collected water. It still filtered sunlight through algae and leaf tannins. It still supported life. A small life. A normal life. Until the otter showed up and refused to leave. It began as a tiny oddity that only a few people noticed, which is how the bigger stories always begin. Small enough that you can ignore them without feeling guilty. A retired electrician named Harland was the first one to mention it out loud. He walked the pond loop every morning with a thermos of coffee and a knee brace he pretended he didn't need. One Tuesday, just after sunrise, he saw the otter near the old spillway, where the pond narrowed toward the creek outlet. At first it looked like a simple wildlife moment. Sleek body, dark fur, quick head movement as it surfaced, whiskers glittering with water. Harland had seen otters before, just not often this close to town. He watched for a minute, expecting it to vanish into the reeds and slip away along the creek. Instead, it stayed. It didn't just stay for a few minutes either. The animal circled the same patch of water, then climbed onto the flat rock near the spillway, shook itself once, and slid back in. It did that again, then again, like it had decided this was its station. Harlan went home and told his daughter about it at breakfast. She smiled politely, the way people smile when they love you but don't share your fascination with pond details. On Wednesday, Harland saw it again. Same area, same behavior, same stubborn presence near the spillway and the shadow of the mill. By Friday, he started calling it the pond otter, like it was a resident with a lease. That weekend, a teenager named Alina filmed it from the overlook and posted a short clip. The video wasn't spectacular. No close-up, no dramatic music. Just a dark little head popping up and vanishing, then popping up again. The comments were the usual mix. Cute, lucky, where is this? Don't bother it. People arguing about whether it was an otter or a muskrat. But something in the clip made a local wildlife rehab volunteer pause. Maren Kells had spent enough time around rivers and emergency calls to recognize when an animal's routine wasn't quite right. Not sick, exactly. Not clearly injured. Just anchored. Otters move. They travel. They hunt along stretches of water, sometimes miles in a night, following fish, crayfish, whatever is available. A single otter camping in one spot for days can mean a few things. Food abundance, a den, a pup nearby, an injury, or a problem in the water that's forcing behavior into a corner. Marin didn't comment. She just saved the clip. Monday morning, she went to the pond herself. She arrived when the air was still cool and the light was clean. The mill building looked heavier in the morning, the brick dark with overnight moisture. A faint fog hovered above the pond surface, thin enough to see through, thick enough to make everything feel slightly unreal. Marin walked quietly to the spillway. She didn't see the otter at first. Then the water rippled near a clump of reeds. A head surfaced, black eyes scanning. The animal looked directly at Marin. No fear, no curiosity, display, just a hard assessment, and slipped under again. Marin waited. The otter surfaced again, closer this time, and circled. Not playful, not hunting, circling. That's when Marin noticed the next detail. The animal's coat wasn't wrong, but it didn't look perfect either. Otter fur is dense, water-shedding, almost unreal when it's healthy. This one looked slightly dull in patches, as if the waterproofing had been compromised by something thin and persistent. And the smell. It hit Maureen as she stood there, not dramatic enough to make her cough, but noticeable if you paid attention. A faint chemical edge, like a garage rag that has touched something you shouldn't touch with bare hands. It didn't smell like sewage. It didn't smell like rot. It smelled like a kind of wrong that doesn't belong in a pond. Marin stepped back, scanned the water surface. No obvious sheen, not a rainbow slick like gasoline. Still, the water near the spillway looked a little too clear compared to the rest of the pond. Clarity can be a trick. Clear water isn't always healthy water. Sometimes it's water that isn't holding life the way it should. She crouched, ran her fingers over a rock at the edge, then rubbed her fingertips together. They felt slightly slick. Not algae slick. Something else. Marin's first instinct wasn't to panic. It was a measure. She pulled a small notebook from her pocket and wrote down what she saw. Location, time, weather, the otter's behavior, the smell. Then she did what people who work with animals learn to do quickly. She shifted her focus from the otter is the story to the otter is reacting to the story. Her eyes moved along the shoreline toward the old mill, toward the cracked concrete channel that used to feed the water wheel, toward the ditch lines and culverts that ran behind the building. At the edge of the mill's yard, half hidden by weeds, a rusted pipe stuck out of the ground. It wasn't large. It looked like it had once carried runoff from the building to the creek. Marin walked closer and saw discoloration on the soil around it, a pale stain that didn't match the rest of the earth. She didn't touch it. Instead, she backed away, took photos with her phone, and called the town's public works office. The person who answered sounded bored until Marin mentioned the words chemical smell and wildlife distress. Then the tone changed. Public Works promised to send someone out. That phrase, delivered in that careful voice, always means the same thing. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe never, unless the right pressure is applied. Marin applied pressure. She called again, this time to the county environmental health line. She gave the details slowly and clearly. She emphasized the nursing home-like risk in any environmental story. People don't feel the danger until it's already inside the system. The county office took the report seriously enough to open a file. They asked for photos. They asked for the exact coordinates. They asked if there were any dead fish. Marin hadn't seen dead fish. Not yet. That afternoon, Harland, the retired electrician, walked the pond loop again. He found the first fish near the reeds, belly up, small and pale. Then another. By evening, more appeared, scattered in pockets, not a full die-off, just enough to create that cold sense that something invisible is changing. People began to notice. A mother with 2 kids at the bench saw a fish, wrinkled her nose, and led her kids away. A dog walker posted a photo. The comments shifted from cute otter to what's wrong with the pond. The next morning, a public works truck arrived. 2 workers stepped out, wearing reflective vests and the expression of men who would rather be anywhere else. They walked the shore, looked at the dead fish, sniffed the air, and said words like, "probably algae," and "hot week." Marin watched from a distance and felt her patience tighten. It was not a hot week. The air had been mild. The water wasn't pea green the way algae blooms look. The fish deaths were patchy. The smell wasn't organic. She approached, introduced herself, and showed them the photos near the mill pipe. One worker squinted, then shrugged. Old building? Old pipes. Probably nothing. Marin didn't argue with them. She understood something about institutional inertia. You can't win by trying to convince someone who doesn't want work. You win by creating a reason for work that is bigger than their desire to avoid it. So she did the thing that changes priorities. She called the county back and said public works had visited, but the fish deaths were increasing. County asked for a sample. Marin came prepared. She had sterile bottles in her car, because experience teaches you not to arrive empty-handed when you suspect you'll be asked for proof. She filled 1 bottle near the spillway, another near the reeds, a third near the inlet creek. Each bottle was labeled, sealed, and placed in a cooler. Then, because she couldn't stop thinking about the otter, she kept watching. The animal still refused to leave. It stayed near the same section of water, close to the old spillway and the mill. It surfaced, scanned, dove. It climbed onto the flat rock and shook itself. It repeated that loop as if drawn by a thread. One detail became clearer over the next 2 hours. The otter wasn't roaming the pond. It was guarding a boundary. When it dove, it didn't travel far. It resurfaced in nearly the same place. When it climbed onto the rock, it faced toward the mill yard and the spillway, as if those were the things it needed to track. At one point, it disappeared under the reeds and didn't reappear for almost 5 minutes. Marin's heart went tight with the idea that it had been injured and was struggling. Then it popped up closer to shore, and behind it, briefly, barely visible, 2 tiny shapes broke the surface and vanished again. Pups. That changed the entire picture. Now the stubbornness made sense in one way. A den was nearby. A mother otter doesn't abandon pups. She doesn't relocate easily unless forced. She will stay, hunt, protect, and hold territory. But it also made the danger sharper. If something toxic was entering the pond, a mother with pups would be anchored in it. The pups would be exposed. Their coats wouldn't protect them fully yet. Their bodies would be smaller, less resilient. What harmed fish could harm them fast. Marin's phone rang while she watched. County environmental specialist. His name was Reed, and his voice sounded like a man who had already seen too many small incidents become expensive disasters. Reed asked where Marin was. He asked what she observed. Marin told him about the pups. There was a pause. Then Reed said he was on his way with a field kit. By noon, a county vehicle pulled into the gravel lot near the mill pond. Reed stepped out, mid-30s, Practical boots, clipboard, cooler, and the kind of calm that comes from having protocols for panic. With him came a second specialist, Jules, who handled water systems and contamination tracing. They greeted Marin, then moved immediately to the spillway area. They didn't start with the fish, they started with the water. Reed crouched, filled a small vial, and ran a quick screening. He didn't announce results dramatically. He simply narrowed his eyes and repeated the test in a second spot. Jules walked along the mill yard edge, scanning the ground, checking for drainage routes, tracing where water could be moving. After about 15 minutes, Jules looked up, pointed toward the back of the mill building. A shallow ditch line ran from behind the structure down toward the pond. It was mostly dry on the surface, but the soil looked darker than it should, and a thin trickle moved beneath leaves as if the water wanted to hide. Reed followed. They found a culvert pipe behind the mill, half buried, leading from the building's interior drainage system to the pond. Near the culvert mouth, there was a faint sheen. Not rainbow gasoline, a milky, almost invisible film that caught the light only at a certain angle. Jules placed a small, absorbent pad on the water surface. When she lifted it, the pad showed discoloration. Reed's face tightened. He didn't say poison yet. Professionals don't lead with the scariest word. He said, contaminant. Then he called for backup. What happened next was not cinematic. It was procedural. That's what makes it feel real. Reed notified the county emergency coordinator. He asked for temporary pond access restrictions. He requested a water utility representative, because if the contaminant reached groundwater connections, the situation would widen. The town's police department arrived first. 2 officers who looked slightly confused about why they were here, until Reed explained that people needed to be kept away from the water. Yellow tape went up around the overlook and the path entrances. Signs were posted, printed fast and ugly. No water contact, do not fish, keep pets away. People hate being told to stay away from familiar places. It makes them suspicious. It makes them angry. It makes them gossip. Within an hour, social media filled with theories. Algae bloom. Someone dumped paint. A dead deer upstream. Government cover-up. A chemical spill from the mill. That last theory was the closest. The problem was, nobody really knew what the mill had done historically. It had been a mill, which sounds quaint. In reality, old mills often had a second life. Machine shop, fuel storage, small industrial processing. In the decades when regulations were loose, people used buildings for whatever made money. Reed asked the town clerk for old records. The clerk wasn't thrilled about digging through dusty folders, but the presence of county officials changes a person's motivation. A file was produced. Old permits, partial renovation attempts, an ownership chain that looked like a maze. One detail jumped out. In the late 1980s, the mill property had been leased to a company that specialized in wood treatment and preservation. That meant chemicals. It meant pressure tanks, solvents, preservatives. The lease ended abruptly. The company dissolved a few years later. After that, the building changed hands several times, mostly between people who wanted cheap property and big dreams. The question became immediate. If the building had hosted chemical operations decades ago, were there still residues, buried drums, old tanks, a hidden sump? Jules walked the exterior again, paying attention to the landscape. She looked for depressions, unnatural mounds, patched concrete, spots where vegetation grew differently. Behind the building, near the ditch line, The ground dipped in a way that didn't match the surrounding area. A shallow depression filled with leaf litter, looking like nothing. Jules knelt, pushed aside leaves, and uncovered a concrete cap. Not new, weathered, stained, with a metal ring in the center. Reed came over. He stared at it for a moment, then said the words Marin had been expecting. "That's a sump access." Reed's team didn't open it immediately. They called hazmat. Because in contamination cases, the worst outcome is not, "You didn't act fast enough." It's, "You acted fast in the wrong way and got someone hurt." While they waited, Marin couldn't stop looking at the pond. The otter surfaced again near the reeds. Pups followed. They stayed close to the mother, tiny heads bobbing briefly before diving. They seemed energetic, not lethargic. That was good. It also meant exposure hadn't yet reached the point of collapse. Reed approached Marin quietly and asked if she knew anyone with otter handling experience. Marin did. She called a regional wildlife rehab center. The director, a blunt woman named Tessa, picked up on the second ring. Marin explained the situation. Tessa didn't waste time with sympathy. She asked, how many pups, what behavior, what type of contaminant suspected? Marin answered honestly, unknown contaminant, likely industrial chemical, fish deaths increasing, mother staying localized. Tessa said she'd send a team with transport crates, nets, and sedation gear, not to catch immediately, to be ready. Because with otters, you don't improvise. You plan, then move quickly in the narrow window when the animals can be secured without separating mother and pups. By late afternoon, hazmat arrived. A white truck, men and women in protective gear, equipment that made bystanders step back, phones raised, a portable detector unit, absorbent booms. Reed walked them to the concrete cap. They tested the air around it first. Then they used a tool to lift the cap. When the cap came up, a stale breath of trapped air emerged. Not rotten, not like sewage. Chemical. It was the same wrong note Marin had smelled earlier, only stronger and older. A flashlight beam went down into the sump. The light revealed standing liquid below, dark and reflective. The hazmat lead, a woman with a steady voice, said a few numbers quietly to Reed and Jules. Then she nodded once. Containment needed. They placed booms at the pond edge where the ditch line entered, hoping to slow spread. Absorbent pads went into the trickle zones. Reed's field kit results began to clarify the situation. Not the exact chemical identity yet, but category behavior. The water showed elevated toxicity markers. Something that should not be in surface water was present, and it was not a one-time splash. It was feeding continuously. Jules traced the flow. She followed the ditch line back toward the building. She found a secondary drainage route, partially hidden under brush, leading from a cracked foundation vent. Behind that vent, the soil was wet, unnaturally wet for the season. It was as if groundwater was pushing up from below, carrying contamination with it. Reed made the call to escalate. County issued a local advisory. Avoid the pond area. Keep pets away. Do not fish. Do not allow children near the water. The town's mayor appeared briefly, looking as if someone had forced him into a role he didn't want. He spoke about an investigation and public safety. He promised transparency, which is what politicians say when they're about to learn how hard transparency is. Meanwhile, the real danger remained quiet. The contaminant wasn't exploding. It wasn't smoking. It was seeping. And seepage is insidious because it keeps doing damage while people argue about whether it matters. That night, rain rolled in. Not a gentle sprinkle. A steady rainfall that turned the gravel lot into wet mush and made the ditch lines run faster. Reed watched the sky and felt the urgency shift again. Rain would wash more contaminant into the pond. Worse, if the sump overflowed, the leak could spread beyond the pond into the creek, carrying poison downstream to other water bodies. That's how small contamination becomes a regional incident. Hazmat placed additional booms and berms. They laid down absorbent socks in the drainage pathways. They worked with the town to divert surface runoff away from the most contaminated zones. It helped, but it didn't fix the source. The source was inside the old mill system. At dawn the next day, the wildlife rehab team arrived. Tessa stepped out of a van, looked at the pond, then at the taped-off area, then at Marin. Her expression said the same thing it always says in these situations. This is going to be messy, so don't romanticize it. They set up quietly. Transport crates lined with towels. A net plan. A route to move animals away from the water quickly. A temporary holding space in the van. Reed coordinated timing. They needed to catch the mother and the pups together, or as close to together as possible. If pups were caught without the mother, stress could kill them even if toxins didn't. If the mother fled without the pups, she would likely try to return, which could undo all progress. They waited until the mother moved toward a reeds near the spillway. The team moved in. The capture wasn't cinematic. It was controlled, quick, and tense. A net swept low. A crate door opened. A gloved hand moved with practiced confidence. The mother thrashed, then calmed slightly as the crate enclosed her. A second net captured one pup, then another. Each pup was placed into a smaller crate that could be kept close to the mother's crate to reduce panic. Tessa didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She checked breathing, checked responsiveness, checked for visible injury. Then she signaled the team to move. They left the pond with the animals within minutes. The absence of the otter, oddly, made the pond feel emptier than it had any right to. Marin stared at the water, feeling the story's emotional anchor disappear. Now it was just a contaminated pond, a dying fish smell, and a building full of secrets. Reed and Jules shifted into the next phase. Source identification and removal. They obtained emergency access authorization to enter the mill building. The property owner, some distant investor who lived 2 states away, had been unreachable. County didn't wait. In environmental hazards, the law tends to be less patient. The mill's back door was forced open. Inside, the air was stale and damp. The floor was littered with debris, old pallets, torn insulation, dead leaves blown in through broken windows. Light beams cut through dust and spider webs. Jules walked with a cautious, scanning posture as if the building could bite. Reed followed, field kit in hand. They found old equipment, rusted tanks, pipes, a large pressure cylinder that looked like it had been used for treatment processes. There were stains on the concrete that didn't match ordinary water. In the back room, beneath a layer of trash and collapsed drywall, they found a drain. The drain led to an underground channel system. That system connected to the sump outside. It was all part of an old industrial layout that had been abandoned, not dismantled. Someone had left a hidden infrastructure in place. Reed's flashlight found another concrete cap inside the building, a second access point. Hazmat tested again. The readings were worse. They opened it. Below, a narrow chamber held old liquid residue and sludge. The sludge looked like nothing and everything, dark, viscous, with a faint sheen. Jules swore under her breath, not loudly, just enough to release tension. This wasn't new contamination, this was legacy contamination that had been sleeping until something woke it up. What wakes sleeping poison? Water intrusion, cracking, ground shifts, a storm pattern that increases seepage, a broken pipe, or human interference. That last possibility lingered because 2 days earlier, there hadn't been a crisis. There had been an otter, a few dead fish, and a smell. Now, there were booms, hazmat gear, and evacuated wildlife. Something had changed recently. Reed asked Public Works for recent reports. Had anyone been working on the mill property, clearing brush, digging, trying to salvage scrap, trespassing? Public Works shrugged. Nobody official. But towns have unofficial labor. A local man named Corey, known for scavenging scrap metal, was seen near the mill a week earlier. Someone reported him cutting ivy off the fence line. Another person said they saw him dragging a length of pipe toward his truck. Police spoke to Corey that afternoon. He admitted he'd been on the property. He denied touching anything underground. He said he'd cut brush to get to old metal. He said he didn't open any caps, didn't have the tools. He also said something that made Reed's attention sharpen. He'd noticed a soft spot in the ground behind the building and stepped around it because it looked like it might cave. Soft spot. Depression. The same area Jules had found. That suggested the chamber had been compromised. Not necessarily by Corey directly, but by the slow collapse of old structures. Reed didn't accuse him. Accusations don't clean water. He focused on engineering. Hazmat brought in vacuum equipment to remove the contaminated liquid from the chambers. They pumped it into sealed containers designed for hazardous waste. Soil around the sump access was excavated carefully, bagged, and stored for proper disposal. Absorbent booms remained at the pond inlet, but even with containment, contamination had already entered the pond. That required a different response. Jules worked with a water quality contractor to develop a remediation plan. They introduced activated carbon filtration in the inflow area to capture residual toxins. They planned aeration to improve dissolved oxygen and help the pond recover once the poison source was cut off. Meanwhile, fish deaths increased, then slowed. The slowing was a small relief, a sign that the leak was being reduced. It didn't mean the water was safe. It meant the water was no longer being fed a steady stream of wrong. 2 days after pumping began, Reed received preliminary lab results from the county lab. He didn't share exact chemical formulas with the public. He didn't need to. He told the mayor what category of contaminant they were dealing with: an industrial preservative compound consistent with old wood treatment operations, harmful to aquatic life, dangerous for animals that spend long periods in the water. That aligned with the historical lease records. It also answered a question Morin had been carrying quietly. Why didn't the water show a dramatic surface sheen? Because not all poisons float. Some dissolve. Some bind to sediment. Some hide in the water's chemistry like a knife hidden in a coat. Reed held a town meeting in the small community hall. Not because he wanted attention, because rumors are a second kind of contamination, and they spread faster than chemicals. He explained what they knew, what they were doing, and what residents needed to do. avoid contact, keep pets away, stop fishing. He also acknowledged the emotional reality. This pond was part of the town's identity, and losing access felt like losing a piece of home. Someone asked the question everyone wanted to ask in a slightly different way. How long has this been happening? Reed didn't lie. They couldn't be certain. Evidence suggested old contamination had been present for years, likely contained in underground chambers. Recent structural failure or water intrusion caused active leakage into the pond. That answer, honest and unsettling, created a quiet anger in the room. People wanted a villain. They wanted a person to blame. They wanted someone to point at. Instead, they got what reality often gives: history, neglect, and a failing barrier that finally broke. After the meeting, Marin drove to the Wildlife Rehab Center. She needed to see the otters. Tessa met her at the intake room and walked her to a quiet enclosure. The mother otter was there in a shallow pool with clean water, moving cautiously but not collapsing. The pups stayed close. Their fur looked slightly ragged, but they were alive. They were eating. Tessa explained what they were doing: detox support, hydration, careful monitoring. Otters can recover if exposure is caught early enough, but the risk remains because toxins can linger in their bodies. The pups, being small, were the fragile part. Marin watched them for a long time. A strange emotion settled in her chest. Not relief exactly, more like gratitude mixed with frustration. Gratitude that someone had noticed. Frustration that someone noticing had been the thin line between a contained incident and a full ecological collapse. Back at the pond, work continued. Contractors placed temporary barriers. They scraped contaminated sediment from the most affected inlet zone. They installed a filtration unit near the ditch entry. Reed and Jules kept pushing to identify every possible pathway. They found a second drainage line from the building, leading to a different part of the pond, weaker but present. That line was capped and sealed. Soil there was also removed. As they dug, they uncovered more surprises. A buried metal drum, corroded, half collapsed. It wasn't the main source. It was a relic, another forgotten mistake. It was removed and contained, photographed, documented. There was no single gotcha moment. There was a series of small discoveries that built the ugly truth. The mill had been a chemical site, and the land still carried that history like a stain under a fresh coat of paint. Over the following 2 weeks, the pond changed. Its surface looked cleaner. The smell faded. Fish death stopped, though fish don't return overnight. The system needed time. Water needed time. Sediment needed time. The town reopened the path on one side, keeping the shore closest to the mill restricted. People returned cautiously, as people do when their routines have been interrupted. They stood at the tape line, staring at their pond like it had betrayed them. Some asked about the otter, not because they cared about otters as a concept, but because this particular otter had become the face of the crisis, the small witness that made the invisible visible. Marin told them what she could. Mother and pups were alive, improving, not ready for release. Then came the next twist, the one that would have sounded too neat if someone wrote it as fiction. A week after the pumping and excavation, Jules found something that explained the otter's refusal to leave in a deeper way. It wasn't only pups. It wasn't only territory. It was a clean seep. Near the spillway rock where the otter had been climbing, Jules noticed a subtle difference in the water. A narrow line of cooler flow, like a small spring entering the pond. It was almost invisible unless you looked carefully. It came from a fracture in the stone near the old spillway structure, a tiny groundwater seep feeding into the pond. Jules sampled it. The seep water had far lower contaminant levels than the rest of the pond. Clean water entering from below. It wasn't enough to make the pond safe. It was enough to create a microzone where the mother otter could keep herself and the pups in comparatively better conditions. That meant the otter wasn't just stubborn. It was adapting with precision. Its behavior, the repeated surfacing in that same patch, the constant return to the spillway rock, could be read as the animal tracking the best water available while everything else worsened. A small survival strategy. Marin felt a chill when she heard that. The otter had stayed because it had found the only tolerable edge inside a poisoned environment. The pups had been raised on a narrow band of safety that could have vanished with one storm. That storm, inconveniently, arrived 3 days later. Heavy rain again, fast and intense. The kind that tests containment systems. Reed and Jules didn't sleep much that night. They monitored runoff lines, checked booms, watched the pond inlet. The new barriers held, some sediment washed, but the main leak source had been removed. The pond took the rain and stayed stable. The creek downstream remained within safe screening thresholds. In the morning, when the sky cleared, the pond looked freshly washed, almost innocent. People wanted to believe it was over. Reed didn't let them. He explained that remediation is a process. Toxins bind to sediment. Recovery takes months. Monitoring will continue. Fish populations will return slowly, and some may need restocking once water quality is consistently safe. The town council, under pressure and suddenly motivated, approved a long-term plan. Remove remaining contaminated soil around the mill foundation, secure the building, prevent trespass, pursue funding for demolition or proper restoration. The mill, for the first time in decades, became a priority. Not because of aesthetics, because it had proven itself dangerous. Weeks passed. The wildlife rehab center continued treatment. The pups gained weight. Their coats improved. Their energy returned in a way that made the staff cautiously optimistic. Tessa called Marin one afternoon with a tone that was almost cheerful, which on Tessa is essentially a parade. Release planning could begin. Release is not a simple open the door and hope. Release is choosing a safe site with stable food supply, clean water, low human disturbance, and appropriate habitat. For otters, it's even trickier because they travel and establish territories. Releasing them too close to the original pond could cause a return, and the pond wasn't fully cleared yet. A site was chosen upstream, miles away, in a protected wetland stretch where the creek widened and reed beds offered cover. Reed's team approved it after testing. On release day, Marin drove with Tessa to the site. The crates were loaded carefully, padded, secured. The mother otter was calm in that tense, coiled way wild animals become when they sense movement and change. The pups made small noises inside their crate, more curious than terrified now. They arrived at the wetland near late afternoon, when light was soft and the water looked like polished stone. Tessa carried the crate to the water's edge. Marin stood back, trying to keep her body still because wild animals read movement as threat. The crate door opened. The mother otter hesitated for 1 second, then moved forward with clean certainty. She slid into the water like she belonged to it, because she did. The pups followed awkwardly, then with sudden confidence, their bodies learning the old instinct. They disappeared under reeds almost immediately. No farewell, no gratitude, no cinematic pause, just life resuming where it was supposed to. Marin stood there and felt an unexpected heaviness. Not sadness, a kind of humbling. The animal had never been trying to communicate with humans. It had been trying to survive. Humans noticed because it refused to behave the way humans expected. That refusal became the signal. Back in town, the pond stayed closed to fishing for the season. The path reopened fully with warnings. Dogs were kept on leash. People respected the signs more than usual, because fear leaves a residue too. A month later, the first positive monitoring report was posted on the town website. Contaminant levels were decreasing. Filtration measures were effective. Sediment testing showed improvement. The creek downstream remained safe. The report wasn't exciting. It was a set of numbers and cautious phrases. Still, it felt like relief. On an early autumn morning, Harland walked the pond loop again. He stopped at the spillway rock where he'd first seen the otter. The water looked normal now. Dark, reflective, living. No otter surfaced. That absence made sense. It also felt strange, like the pond had lost a small secret. Harland stood there for a while, listening to the soft sound of the creek outlet, watching a dragonfly skim the surface. He thought about how easily the leak could have stayed hidden. A toxic seep doesn't announce itself with a boom. It changes small things first: fish behavior, algae patterns, fur texture, tiny deaths that people ignore because they don't want more problems. Then it changes bigger things. Then it becomes a headline. In this case, it had stopped short of disaster, not because the town was particularly wise, but because an otter had chosen a narrow band of cleaner water and clung to it day after day, refusing to abandon its pups. That refusal, irritating to some, fascinating to others, became the tell. A creature that should have moved on stayed anchored. A pond that should have remained boring became evidence. And the old mill, which everyone had treated like harmless nostalgia, finally revealed what it really was: a sealed box of forgotten chemicals, waiting for the moment the ground cracked enough to let it breathe. In the weeks after, the town talked about the otter the way people talk about symbols. They made it into a story about instincts. They said the animal knew. Marin didn't argue, but she didn't romanticize it either. She knew what was true and what was comforting. The otter didn't have a moral lesson for the town. It had a survival problem. The town's job was to pay attention, because sometimes the earliest warning isn't a siren or a sensor or a report. Sometimes it's a wild animal acting strangely in a familiar place, staying where it shouldn't, refusing to leave water that has quietly become dangerous. This time, that refusal pulled the poison leak into the light before it could spread downstream, before it could poison more wildlife, before it could turn the pond into a long-term dead zone. The pond would heal slowly. The mill would either be secured or torn down. The town would, for a while, remember what it felt like to lose trust in its own water. And somewhere upstream, in a wetland where reeds bent in the wind and the water moved cleanly over stones, a mother otter and her pups would keep doing what otters do: moving, hunting, leaving no sign at all. Which, after everything, felt like the best ending possible.